Morning, everyone. Welcome to Council Chambers City Hall here for our council meeting, February the 23rd, 2015. And I'll ask our clerks for the roll call, please.
Mayor Robertson's in the chair. Councillor Louis. Councillor Stevenson. Councillor Deal. Councillor Jang. Councillor Reimer is on medical leave. Councillor Meggs. Councillor Ball on medical leave. Councillor Carr. Councillor Affleck. And Councillor DeGenova. Mr. Mayor, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. And again, welcome everyone. Before we jump into our agenda, I want to give a special welcome to our new General Manager of Community Services, Kathleen Llewellyn-Thomas. First council meeting for you, first of many, I'm sure, and we're thrilled to have you here as our newest General Manager here at the city. And you've been here for a week, so you're all settled in, you know how everything works. And we're really happy to have you here. Thanks for joining us today. So we need a motion from council on in camera. Council's required to meet later this day, or later this week. In camera, the reasons and authority under the Vancouver Charter are listed in the updated agenda. Councillor Louis will move. Councillor Deal seconds. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that carries. So we will go in camera following this council meeting today. And minutes we have from our last set of meetings. Minutes number 1 are from our council meeting, February the 2nd. Any corrections? No corrections. Councillor Deal moves and Councillor Jang seconds that. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that carries. Councillor, my apologies. You're flashy right there on my right. Minutes 2 are from the chauffeur's permit appeal hearing on February the 2nd. Any corrections to those? A mover, Councillor Deal, seconder, Councillor Jang. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Minutes 3 are from the council meeting that followed the City Finance and Services Committee meeting on February the 3rd. Any corrections to those? Councillor Jang moves and Councillor Deal seconds. All those in favor of adoption? Any opposed? That carries unanimously. And the final set of minutes from the Court of Revision meeting, February the 3rd. Any corrections to those? Councillor Deal moves adoption. Jang seconds. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that carries. So all of our minutes are adopted from the last meetings, and we're on to our consent agenda items. We have 3 administrative reports, 1 policy report on the agenda for consideration, and Council has received requests to speak to administrative reports 2 and 3. So if Council wishes to hear the speakers, the reports can be referred to tomorrow's Standing Committee on Policy and Strategic Priorities, tomorrow 9:30, and moved by Councillor Jang, seconded by Councillor Carr. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that carries. So those 2 reports come back here from speakers. And what else we got? Bylaw 15 is related to administrative report number 3, so that will move as well to tomorrow's meeting as it's attached. The remaining reports, we have A1 and P1. We can adopt the recommendations with those in a single motion unless someone wishes to hold one of those. Councillor Carr?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if you could hold report P1, please.
Okay. P1, okay, so we'll hold that, and that means that all we've got is administrative report number 1. The recommendations we can adopt as part of the consent agenda. P1 is being held, and for debate, separate vote, conflict of interest. Councillor Deal moves that A1, and Councillor Jang seconds. Any debate on A1? Report number A1. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that carries. So we've approved 601 West Hastings Street, lease of volumetric portion of lane. That's the one report that is now adopted, the recommendations within that, and the others are all coming back for later in this meeting or tomorrow. So we're on to just clarifying with our motions on notice. We have a similar phenomenon. We've received requests to speak to motions on notice B1, B3, B4, and B6. So if council wishes to hear from the speakers, motions can be referred to tomorrow's committee meeting. And Councillor Carr will move referral to hear speakers on those 4 meetings. And And let's see here. Yeah, we should do each one, shouldn't we? So let's start with B1. Actions to protect taxpayers from soaring assessments. I'll ask for referral on that. Councillor Meggs, first you need to move that motion. You brought that forward.
Don't speak till later, right?
Councillor Meggs is moving it. Seconder is Councillor Jang. So we'll go to referral on that. Councillor Louis moves referral, a seconder. Councillor Deal. And to hear from speakers tomorrow, all those in favor? Any opposed? And that carries. And this next motion that we are going to consider as motion B3, explore options for increasing city support for music and musicians. Councillor Deal, would you like to move that motion? Okay, you're moving the motion and referral. And we need a seconder for that. Councillor Carr will second that and the referral. Any debate on the referral? All those in favor? Any opposed? And that carries. And B4 is preparing Vancouver for autonomous and driverless vehicles. Councillor Meggs, can you move the motion and referral? Okay. And I think I was going to second that motion. If memory serves. So any debate on referral? All those in favor? Any opposed? And that carries. And B6 is entitled Urgent Actions to Combat the Growing Homelessness Crisis. I'll call on Councillor Carr to move the motion and refer that. You do that? Okay. Okay, and Councillor DeGenova seconds the referral, the motion and referral. Any debate on referral to tomorrow? To hear from speakers? None seen. All those in favor of referral? Any opposed? That carries. So we've dealt with the motions that are referred to hear from speakers tomorrow, and we need a motion to go into committee of the whole. Councillor Carr, seconded by Councillor Jang. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that carries. So the first item up as we sit in committee of the whole today is a report reference, an update on the public bike share system. And we have here Jerry Dobrovoni, who's our General Manager of Engineering Services, to give us that update. Welcome, Mr. Dobrovoni.
Mr. Mayor and members of council. Well, I'm here in front of you again to provide yet one more update on the public bike share project. It's been an 8-year journey. So I thought I'd cut right to the chase with slide 1. It's a beautiful sunny day and we have a deal. And thank you. And so the staff team has been working very hard on getting the deal, and so I'd like to take some time to take you through it. But first, we've signed a deal for a 5-year agreement to provide bike share services. CycleHop is the Canadian company from Ottawa that is the operator. The bike share system, consistent with the discussions we've had over the 8 years, would be a system that starts out with 1,500 bikes and 150 stations. The launch is set for June of this year. Mid-June is the target date, with the first 1,000 bikes in operation. It would expand to 1,500 bikes, and the city will pay $5 million as a fee for 5 years of service. And so I thought I'd take you through, remind everybody the background of this and all the changes that have happened, not only as we learned, but the evolution of the industry, the procurement process and the vendor we selected and the agreement, et cetera. Because it is a big day. This goes back to July of 2008 when council first directed staff to go out and look at public bike share systems. In March, again, we had specific direction to launch a procurement process, which in April 11th was when we issued a request for expressions of interest. Alta was the system that we selected as the preferred proponent. And in June, we came to council with an update on that. 2011 was the update that we presented. October, Council amended a number of bylaws that allowed for operation of public bike share within the City of Vancouver. November 2012, the Vancouver Park Board provided approval to allow bike share stations in park property. In 2013, we received council support for the framework of a system, 1,500 bikes, 125 stations, that included an integrated helmet solution and return system, and provided approval for us to enter into negotiations and an agreement with Alta Bike Share as owner, but provided that they met a number of conditions. And those were a number of the updates that we've provided were related to the difficulty that we had in negotiating with Alta and their ability to meet those conditions. And those conditions related to their ability to achieve financing, their ability to achieve sponsorship, their ability to provide a helmet system, among other things. And so that's where we got stalled. Council approved the framework for that bike share system back in 2013. That framework included a budget of $6 million for a contribution from the city. It provided allowance for $800,000 a year in foregone parking meter revenue for any stations that we would install at the curbside. It provided $1 million for a startup, for staffing, signage, wayfinding costs, and then an ongoing budget for the city of $500,000 a year. So that was the framework that the council provided for us back in 2013. So we worked hard. Alta worked hard. There were a number of real major setbacks. Both Alta and their system provider, Bixby, went through ownership changes. Alta became Motivate. And so despite the best efforts of city staff and good efforts by the vendor as well, they were not able to meet the conditions that were laid out. They were not able to achieve the financing, the sponsorship, the helmet solution. So no money was ever paid by the city to the vendors. We were holding that back until we had a successful agreement. We never reached it. And so on June 11th of last year, 2015, we collapsed that procurement process, and we announced that we would go back out with a new procurement process. So one of the things that happened during that time was there was a real evolution in the industry. And the systems we were looking at then were systems that had, a kiosk that provided all the technology and the payment options. And one of the things we see now is the evolution of the smart bike, where the technology is on the bike. There's also payment kiosks that are optional, but the bikes themselves can be rented and communicated with independently. It allows for smaller stations, and it offers much more flexibility for the users because they can just go to a bike, pick it up, and do a rental from the bike. And there's lower costs, lower capital and operating costs. So we went back out to market July 17th of last year. We received 7 responses. As we were evaluating, they went through a phased approach. Phase 1 was to shortlist 2 proposals, 2 vendor teams, and phase 2 was to identify the preferred vendor. And that the bid committee approved entry into contract negotiations with that one vendor, and that is the one that we've signed with now, which is CycleHop Corporation Canada from Ottawa. These were the vendors, the 6 that supplied, the 2 that were shortlisted, and CycleHop from Ottawa who were selected. The timeline there, again, we've been negotiating fast and furiously. I really want to acknowledge the staff team as well as the proponent team. They worked very, very hard through the holidays and through the new year to get to the agreement. We had some report backs. On December 16th, we received council approval to finalize negotiations. That was done in camera because it was still an active negotiation. And now I'll tell you a little bit about CycleHop. They, as I mentioned, they're a Canadian company from Ottawa. They are the largest smart bike share operations company in North America. A number of systems in place, Ottawa and Orlando and Tampa and Atlanta, around North America. The founder was awarded one of the first U.S. patents for the unattended bike rental machine, and they've been in the industry for a number of years. They offer a full range of solutions, right from planning to funding and implementation, and as I mentioned, currently operate the Ottawa system. So we're very, very pleased that they submitted, and very pleased that we were able to reach agreement. The equipment provider of the bikes is Smooth, a French company. Very large system, a manufacturer in 21 cities around the world, 20,000 bikes out in use as of last year, and you'll see the global presence there on screen in terms of the number of cities they're in all around the world, but just making an entry into North America. The agreement, you remember the framework I just mentioned that Council approved for us. There was a $6 million operating, so the agreement that we've negotiated is that there will be a minimum of 5 years of service with the option for renewal out to 20 years. Target launch of June 15th with 1,000 bikes. The next 500 bikes would come in through the summer. Supplier payment for use of space. So we had budgeted that we could forego up to $800,000 a year of parking loss. CycleHop will pay the first $400,000 of lost meter revenue, and then we would absorb anything beyond that. If the system does better than expected, these aren't money makers in general, but it's a public transportation system. But if they make revenue, then the city would receive a share of the revenue going forward, and there's the ability to expand, and I'll show on a map those areas. And there's also a number of quality control and reporting measures in place for us to help measure and maintain service levels. City contribution is $5 million for 1,500 bikes for a minimum of 5 years. The payment is structured to flow with the bike, so 2/3 is the first 1,000 bikes are in place, and the final third when the next 500 bikes are in place. And again, the in-kind contributions were after the first $400,000 of lost parking meter revenue, then the city would absorb and not be compensated for any additional. So the system, this map shows the area. It's the downtowns, Downey Park, and the Broadway core area, basically from Arbutus to Main Street to 16th Avenue. We're also having some discussions as to whether a connection out to Commercial Drive could be possible. Phase 2 would extend to the west out to McDonald, and to the east out to Commercial Drive. System will be available 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and helmets will be available on bikes at no additional cost to the user. That's a glimpse of what the bikes look like. There's a basket at the front. There's the technology on the front handlebars. When the bikes are in a docking station, they're locked to the forks. If they're out and about and you're stopping, there's an external cable lock that can be used to lock the bike away from a dock. And the rental takes place through the computer that's up on the front handlebars. As I mentioned, the docking stations are smaller, can be broken up into smaller components, so they're easier to place around the city. Rental can either be done through a kiosk or from the bike itself, and stations are modular and operate on solar power. We'll work now, that'll be our real goal, is to identify station locations with CycleHop and do those throughout the city. Generally, they'll be every 2 to 3 blocks. They'll be on either public street, on sidewalks, on plazas, parks, as well as on private lands. And this is a call for any business owners downtown. This is an opportunity to get a bike share location at your front door. In many cities, it's very, very desirable, and it will be desirable in Vancouver as well. It'll bring lots of people to your front door, so make a bit of a plug for them as CycleHop's going out to talk to businesses, because it'll be a real attraction. So that just quickly summarized the financial details that we had council approval and a framework for a $6 million one-time payment to forego up to $800,000 of parking meter revenue a year, the startup funding and the ongoing funding, and the deal that we've negotiated is within that framework. And so, as I mentioned, the work now will be to identify station locations. The work for Cycle Hop will be to secure sponsorship and branding and design. There will be a major public outreach and launch. And with this, Vancouver will have the largest smart bike system in North America on June 15th. So with that, happy to answer any questions that council may have. And leave it at that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dobrovony and the whole team. Great job. Finally, we have achieved the goal of securing a new public bike share system, which has been a goal for council for many years now. And thanks to all your great efforts to make it happen, and even better that it's the new generation of technology, and which will be that much better for Vancouverites and everyone who visits here. So looking forward to this, and very thankful for all the hard work that went into this and making sure we have a state-of-the-art system here in Vancouver with every chance of succeeding as an important piece of our public transportation system. So I've got Councillor Deal up first, who's been a great champion for this over the years.
I'm in a happy dance today. Thank you very much. Anyway, thank you. You know how I feel about this. A couple of questions. I like the fact that you did a shout out for businesses who are going to want the stations in front. Is that a 311 call, or do I give out your cell phone number, or how does what's the best way of having people?
311 would be great, but
Okay.
If they've got a location, then yes, they can call my cell as well.
Okay, that's great. Because we do, of course, have a strategy right now that we're looking at for bike parking in general. So can you describe again, if you're not at one of the stations, you have the bike, you're locking it up, how's that going to work from the rider's point of view? You're in a spot where there isn't one of these big stations. Can you just walk us through the process, where the helmet is, how you lock it, how it's registered,
Sure. The bikes will be free, the helmets will be free of charge. The helmets will be with the bikes. And if there's space at a docking station, you're coming back to a docking station, that would be the first choice. If the spaces are all full, then there'd be the ability to lock to a regular bike rack or something else in the neighborhood. And I think the operator will still go through some rules in terms of that. There might be areas where we want to limit the number of bikes that are locked up to trees and parking meters and anything that's stationary. But technically the ability is there to lock the bike to any permanent object and to start and stop the rental from the bike itself. So the ability is there, and the operator will produce rules around where you can leave bikes and how that would work.
So the software would manage the area in which you're supposed to keep these bikes, and that the software would not operate the same way if you took it down to Southwest Marine Drive, for instance.
Yeah, we have an area that's the coverage area, and so presumably there'll be information that says you start and end your trips in this area, and if people wanted to take them outside of the area, the bikes would be tracked. But yeah.
So this new technology is actually going to change the amount of infrastructure we have to put in place for the bikes, right? I mean, it's we were talking about all having to be at these large corrals, and now we have the option of dispersing them in a more sort of equal way around the area where we're allowing them. Is that?
Yeah, and it's quite an undertaking to find space. As you know, there's tremendous competition for our space out on the city right-of-way, and so it's quite an undertaking to find space for 150 stations. These stations can be smaller, they can be modular, they can be broken up into a number of smaller units as opposed to one large unit. And in some places we may not be able to find a spot for a station, and therefore locking to a regular bike rack or something else might be the answer.
And because it can be modularized, does that allow more flexibility in where the stations go?
Yes, absolutely.
And would that also then decrease the amount of parking revenue perhaps having to be foregone, because we don't necessarily have to take up a full car parking place? Not that there's anything wrong with that. But Okay, so that we can put them in different kind of public spaces that aren't necessarily where cars are currently parking.
Yeah, our goal is to have as much parking as possible, either on private lands or on city lands that are not curb space. We have lots of other competition for curb space in terms of loading zones and food carts and all kinds of
Parklets.
other uses, parklets. But yeah, it does allow us to fit them in a little more easily.
Excellent. And so because we happen to protect ourselves, which we did earlier on through this contract process from some of the problems other cities had, we've had this added benefit of now being at a place where we have the blended technology. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. The industry evolved. I mean, it was, it's a new industry. It's rapidly changing. There's winners and losers, and there's lots of lessons learned. And so, one of the advantages, the disadvantage was it's been a number of years and we haven't had public bike share, and some other cities have moved ahead of us. The advantage was that I think we have a better system in place. We'll have the largest smart bike fleet in North America, and I believe it will be very, very successful here in Vancouver.
Excellent. Well, the largest smart bike fleet is a really impressive from 0 to 1,500. What happens when people start saying we need more? Because I'm anticipating that happening before the end of this meeting.
Yes, and we have
Emails are
learned
already
that.
coming in.
We have learned that from other cities, and so we have a mechanism to expand the fleet over time. There's a mechanism to go, from 1,000 to 1,500 over the 5 years up to 2,500. And so, we have to look to see locations. What we've seen in some other cities is there's strong will to move into neighborhoods that maybe the business case doesn't warrant, and so we have to be a little careful not to overextend. But certainly, we're anticipating expansion. We're anticipating strong demand, and there's the ability in the contract and the partnership to do that.
Well, thank you very much. We've been prudent, we've been proactive, and we're coming out ahead, and I so appreciate your work.
Thank you very much. And thank you for council's patience. I know 8 years is an eternity in council years. So.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Deal. Councillor Louis.
Well, that's a good way to start eternity. It's July 2008 when we started this, and I recall on council at this time it was Councillor Ladner and I that were speaking on this issue and trying to advance this and exploring this. So how many terms ago? Is that 4 terms ago? Yeah. Is when we started this initiative. And I think Councillor Stevenson's not here, but I think Councillor Stevenson and I were the only ones that are on council at the time. So good work. I think much of this work has helped us avoid a number of pitfalls that other cities have certainly fell under. But I'm interested today on the performance, which you said was within the framework, but we've actually performed better than the framework, and which was than what had previously been brought to council, and we had thought we had a tentative deal, a tentative understanding of how to move forward, and now you've come back with something better. How much better is that financially?
Yeah, it's $1 million less than the envelope that council gave us. Council gave us a $6 million envelope, and we negotiated a deal that we think is a very good deal for $5 million. So it's $1 million under the one-time contribution.
Now, in the other response that we had from the other proponent, there was 125 stations, and now there's 150 stations. Is that right? So there's more stations.
There's more stations, and also the anticipated lost parking revenue is half. So yes. You had given us a budget of up to $800,000 of lost parking revenue, and the proponent have offered to pay the first $400,000, and then the city would only absorb anything beyond that $400,000.
Well, quite a bit of financial savings as a result of us taking the time to do our due diligence and such.
Absolutely, and that parking revenue is annual. That's every year.
Now, with those savings, though, I'm interested on how we go about improving service, not just through our public bike share, but our overall infrastructure for cycling. We know that with this system, there will be a draw and demand on our existing bike racks, for instance. And given that they don't necessarily need to go back into the stations themselves, I'm concerned that we're not having enough infrastructure in place to manage and to accommodate the growth that we're already seeing in our regular biking community. And so maybe just describe to me how we will allocate resources to make that accommodation happen.
Yeah, and I'd start by saying we think that's a fantastic challenge to have. is that we believe, we're going to be stressed under capacity, both in bike parking, and we are ramping up. We have a council motion to look at expanding bike parking, and we have works in place to provide additional bike parking throughout the coverage area, as well as citywide. And I'll just take the moment to plug anyone that's listening. If you would like a bike rack at any location in the city, call 311 and make the request if it's near your business. We're happy to go out and locate a bike rack as close as possible to the area that you're requesting. So the bike parking is one. The other is separated bike lanes and bike paths. We are ramping up our construction. We're coming back with additional network. You can see on our webpage our 5-year bike plan has a number of additional bike routes identified for this year, and we anticipate to have a number of those in place for the summer launch as well in the coverage area. One thing we've learned from other cities is that one of the things that really controls how successful the public bike share is how easy it is to get, take the bike. If you can get onto a separated bike lane or a separated bike path where you're confident and it's easy to wayfind and get from point A to point B, the usage is tremendous and the experience is fantastic. If you've got a bike and you take it out and you don't have great connections, you're just next to a street that's got heavy traffic and no bike facility, the experience and the usage is much worse. And so we really want to connect the two.
Okay. Just for clarity's sake, there's 1,500 new bikes in 150 new stations. How many extra bike racks and spaces do you anticipate that we'll be able to introduce?
We haven't identified a number yet. We're going through that process now. We'll look at what the coverage is of the 150. We're looking at specific locations for each of those. We're also looking at demand to see where we're getting complaints and where we're assessing how full the bike racks are that are out there. We're noticing a number of just in the Southeast Falls Creek with the success of a lot of the brew pubs. We're seeing huge volumes of bikes parked at a whole number of those locations, and so we're looking how do we expand those. So it's identifying where we currently have shortages and where we anticipate future shortages.
I would err on the side of proactiveness rather than complaint basis. So.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Louis. Councillor Affleck.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hello. Just first question, I'm curious to know why this report wasn't made public in advance of today. It's nothing revolutionary in here as far as the details. It was, as you mentioned, discussed in camera some time ago. Why was this not made public in advance?
So we've been negotiating right up until, I believe, was it yesterday? Pardon me? Yesterday. The ink is still wet. We just signed. And so...
Nothing like a council meeting to give you a good deadline.
It's a good hard deadline for both sides, yeah.
All right.
Like anything, you've got a long
What happens
way
if you hadn't signed it? Would you just not showed up?
Jared. We were signing.
Okay. That's fine. I just, as you know, I've had many challenges with this whole bike share program, mainly related to the significant public taxpayers' investment into a private business, which will, in effect, compete with the bike rental companies. And that hasn't changed in this report. And as you said, it's based on a previous decision by council, which I did not support. So they just want to get the total investment, $5 million plus $500,000 a year of lost revenue. Is that what I'm sorry? The million. I just want to make sure.
The actual amount of lost parking revenue is unknown at this point. The first we had estimated on the order of $800,000 a year, and so CycleHop have proposed that they would fund the first $400,000, and then the remaining portion the city would absorb. So whatever that is could be anywhere from $0 to $400,000 was our estimate. But until we identify all the station locations, we won't have a final count of how many metered spaces are affected.
So, and it's a 5-year deal. You said for 5 years of service. That's new terminology in this report that I haven't heard before. What does that mean? Before it was a 5-year plan with a 10-year and outlook and all these other things. Now we're looking at a 5-year deal. Is there a rollover deal or for another 5 years? And what's the risk for the city if this company, like so many of these bike share companies, goes bankrupt?
Right. So that's part of the rationale, but behind a service agreement is that we're contracting with CycleHop to provide the service in the city for 5 years. They own, operate, and are responsible for the risk, the business risk associated with that. So that's something that rests with CycleHop. So it's a fee for service from the city. There is an opportunity to expand out to 20 years in total in increments if both sides agree in advance. And so that's the term service is related to the fact that CycleHop owns, operates, owns the risk.
So if it goes bankrupt, our $5 million investment is out the window, or are we top of the list on the assets? Where do we get as an investor in this?
Yeah, so we've negotiated a number of safeguards in the agreement to provide security, varying levels of security throughout the 5 years.
Does that include us taking over operations if this company goes bankrupt? Or
that's an
what
option.
happens?
That's an option that's available. It's not an obligation. I mean, there's a number of what ifs that we could do. It could be assigned to a different operator. It could be the city could take it on. We could go back out to tender again. There's a question of assets. So staff have done a good job of negotiating safeguards to protect the city's investment. Again, I'd like to finish by saying, though, we have every expectation that it's going to be very successful.
Of course you do. Of course you do.
But we plan for the worst and we hope the best.
Okay, I only have so much time, and I thank you for your vote of confidence for this company. How much discussion now? The new technology, the smart bike, as you refer to it, is it much like Car2Go, where you'll be able to, on your app, find out where the bikes are parked if they're not in a rack and be able to go find them? So how do the bike rental companies feel about this? Because likely what might happen is now we're going to potentially see these bike share parked right in front of a bike rental shop, if not one, if not two, three, depending on how many bike racks might be in front of those bike shops. Now you're directly putting a bike share right in front of a bike shop. And I'm wondering, have we talked to the business community and let them know that this new technology is coming, where is that conversation?
Yeah. So that was a concern that was made really clear to us early on in the process. We've had a number of meetings with the bike rental companies. The approach is the same with this deal as what we had talked about in previous years, is that we would not put bikes, in the immediate vicinity.
But you can, because there's no the technology allows you.
Well, you can provide fences. There's electronic fences, and so we can use the technology to influence where the bikes go, or CycleHop can.
Sorry, Adam.
Can I jump in?
No, because I only have 5 seconds left. So I'm sorry.
Councillor,
Manager, just last question regarding.
Councillor Meggs, you're next up.
Pardon me?
Councillor Affleck, you ran out of time there. Your 5 minutes. It's Councillor Meggs.
Yeah, we've done a number of things to support car sharing through its fledgling years, and as a result, it's led to Vancouver being the most successful car share city in North America in terms of providing spaces and providing space. No direct cash.
Councillor Meggs.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll pick up a little bit from where Councillor Affleck left off in terms of the rental shops. Last time we had this conversation, Mr. Doberbalny, there was also a suggestion that the pricing policy would make it unlikely that someone would do a long-term rental on a bike share as opposed to a rental for tourism. Is that still the view?
Yeah, that's the overall objective. I think the industry norms around pricing have changed a little bit, but that's still the objective, is that there'd be a pricing disincentive to take the bike for a number of hours because the intention is a series of one-way trips.
Yeah, because I know if I make a mistake and take my car to go for too long, I get killed financially compared to even taking a taxi. So you're not forecasting, I don't think, that we're going to wind up with driverless bicycles anytime soon. I know that some pedestrians think they're almost driverless on sidewalks at this point anyway, but
I would recommend against that, the driverless bike.
But I'm interested in this smart bike thing. So your proposition is in part that because the entire industry's evolved to this level, that we're maybe skipped some rougher patches here. And we have the biggest smart bike fleet in North America. What are the biggest ones elsewhere? And the other question I'd be interested in is, I know that there was a huge wave
Portland and Hamilton are the other two that will be coming out.
So we're at about 1,500 bikes on this proposition. What are the comparable cities that have full-on bike share, smart or not smart? How big are those fleets, and how big do we think it could get?
Yeah, no, I mean, some of the well-established cities are in the 6,000 and I think as high as 20,000 is Paris. I think is as high as 20,000. So there's a lot of room to grow. But again, as I mentioned, one of the tricks is to really keep an eye on the business side of it and make smart decisions in terms of where you grow. You may for equity reasons want to expand further and further, but these are one-way trips where density and travel demand are the difference between making money and losing money.
Right.
And so you want to look at both of those things. We've seen that is one of the lessons learned from other cities is they expand too quickly over too large a geographic area, and they go from either breaking even or losing a small amount of money to losing a lot of money. And so
my perception too was in traveling a bit, I saw bike share in cities where I wouldn't, it would be like taking your life in your hands to get on a bike as a new arrival and try to ride in traffic. And there was no, I'm thinking of a city in Turkey that had no cycling infrastructure that I could detect whatsoever. In downtown Rome, I thought it would be insane to try to ride a bike. And the bike lanes, such as they were, wandered back and forth across traffic and so on. So I assume that there's a relationship between the appropriate bike infrastructure and the success of a bike share system.
yeah, and certainly for visitors, some of the locals might be willing to brave some of those conditions, but certainly I think a lot of visitors coming into a new city would think twice. And so, that's going to be one of our goals now with Cycle Hop is looking on our all ages and ability network that are separate from vehicles that are designed for children to seniors. Make sure we have as much of the infrastructure on those corridors as we can. So it's very simple, intuitive to take advantage of it and use it. And I think that'll lead to a very enjoyable experience.
This is my last question. I'll circle back to Councillor Affleck's question. I mean, we don't see cities investing in car sharing, but we see them all over the world in the hundreds, as I understand it, supporting bike share. So what is the thinking now? Is it an extension of public transit, or is it an extension of private transit, and where does it fit in? I mean, presumably we're assessing this not just on there's the private sector, let's send money. We're seeing a public benefit here. And I wonder if you could dig deeper into that, because I think that rationale is important to understand.
Sure. I mean, transportation provides a tremendous benefit to all, both in terms of economy and a whole range of issues. And transportation is not a moneymaker in itself. And so public bike share is no different than the transit system. Often it's referred to, as you said, an extension of the transit system. It provides a very, very valuable service that allows people to connect to areas with an inexpensive, environmentally friendly and healthy way of getting around. So there's tremendous benefits to the city as a whole, tremendous benefits to the individuals, and these things don't make a huge profit. And so, cities across the U.S. have had massive infusions of capital from the federal government. Cities around the world have had large contributions. Some cities have done it through very high-profile advertising campaigns, and we've chosen not to bring in a massive advertising component with this. We're doing a city review right now around billboards and sign bylaw and all of that. So we've left that to be part of a larger process on the city as a whole. And so we're looking at sponsorships and some city funding to make a go of it, which is similar to what other cities have done around the world.
All right, that's your time. Councillor Carr.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. My questioning to Dobrovony is very much along the same lines as Councillor Meggs and started by Councillor Affleck. So my first question is around the concern for the current bike rental shops. Are we limiting the distance from those bike shops?
Yeah, we've talked about not having them, in that close proximity. I don't have a specific measurement. It would be a little bit dependent on the streets, but not in direct competition. We wouldn't want to have bike station right out in front of a bike rental company. You know, we clearly understand that. We think there's quite different uses. And, you know, these bikes are heavier bikes, they're more durable bikes. They're probably not the type of bike you'd like to go for a day on. If you've got small kids, you know, you might want a booster seat or a trailer. Those are all available from bike rental companies. This is a very specific use. They're one-way trips, they're short trips.
Okay, that's good. I just wanted to get that very clear, and I think that's important for the business people who are already involved in that. So the second question then is really aiming at also along the lines of thinking of Councillor Meigs. Who are we aiming at in terms of the clientele that we expect? So is it Vancouverites who may see that there's a gap right now in transit, so they use this, as you say, between, you know, in linking from one form of transit to another, or their work of place or their work of pleasure is like, look, it's too far to walk necessarily, so they just take it that distances. Are those the kinds of people that you imagine being the prime users?
Yeah, I think there's a whole variety of users, and that's part of what CycleHop is evaluating in terms of their business plan. You know, the difference between residents and local trips, tourists that are still doing short trips but new to the city, you know, taking a one-day membership versus a monthly membership. Yeah, you know, it trips up to 5 kilometers. Our downtown core, the Central Broadway area are very bikeable, and using the seawall to connect to points. Not necessarily the entire 28 kilometers, but, you know, connecting between, you know, Yaletown and Granville Island, or Main Street Station and English Bay. You know, we've got some great AAA cycling facilities that makes it really easy to connect using Dunsmuir and Hornby, Burrard Bridge. So we think there's a number of origins and destinations that are easily accessible, even for people that aren't the most confident cyclists.
Okay, and again, remind me, what is the optimum cost for value rental time? 1 hour, 2 hours, what is?
Yeah, less than 30 minutes. I mean, these are short trips, less than 30 minutes.
Okay, so it really is those short trips. And are we planning on, I remember in our last discussions about that, well, we've had a few, but back then.
We've had many.
That we also talked about encouraging people in Vancouver who don't ride bikes yet to use this as kind of an entry point. Like, just try it out. Like, you take part of your trip this way. Are we planning on perhaps promoting it that way and getting that message out to the wider public?
Absolutely. Part of our 2040 plan, you know, talks about infrastructure, and I mentioned that several times. It also talks about promotion and enabling, and the whole encouragement, and we've got great partners with Hub and other agencies that provide cycling skills. We found from other cities that this is a way for people to get back into cycling, and after they've used the system a number of times, they dust off the bike that's in the back of their garage somewhere and start using it as well. It also provides an easy option for people that don't want to dust off their bike from the garage. They can just jump on and ride a few blocks and park it, and off they go, and they're done.
Okay, speaking of dusting off bikes, I have one question about the helmets. You said the helmets come attached to the bikes. Well, can you tell me about the cleanliness issue in the helmets?
Yeah, so one of the options that's available, I think they're still working through the specific details, but the option would be to have a little cap that would be a single-use cap that you could wear inside the helmet. So if you're not a regular user and you're using a bike, there's certainly a way to you know, keep it sanitary in terms of the helmet. If you're a regular user, I'd expect many people to bring their own helmet and use that.
Okay, well, thanks very much. Congratulations to you and your team.
Thank you very much. Thanks for council's patience and support.
And Councillor Ball is next up.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for today. I'm working blind today, so forgive me for the classes. I had a question, which is, are you going to be looking at the sighting of bikes as you roll this out and see what's actually happening? Because last summer when I was in London, there was a huge rack of the bikes right beside the British Museum. And I walked by it 4 or 5 times a day, at all times of day, and it was filled with bikes. almost no one used those bikes right, and I have pictures of it because I couldn't believe it. I took pictures all through the day for several weeks. So I'm wondering, is there a process or a way to look and see this rack is useless, we should move it over here, but and it made me question sort of tourism and what kind of tourists will be using the bikes where, and where is it going to be most useful. So I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind addressing how you're going to be looking at that.
Sure. The short answer is yes, absolutely. They'll be looking at that, not only for the initial launch, but then also to monitor it through system performance. So already over the past number of years, we've done a fair bit of fancy computer modeling to look at origin and destination and demand and heat maps to see where the areas of the most use are expected to be. And what we know from other cities is some of that will be right and some of it will be wrong. And so once the system is put in place, then you use real usage to start to adjust. And one of the things that's really nice about this system is the racks are modular. It's easy to add a little bit to it or to take a little bit away. They're solar, and so they can just be changed as we go. The other component for the operator is uphill and downhill. You see bikes migrating. From a lot of people will jump on the bike to ride it downhill. They might take the bus back, and so bikes move around throughout the day. And so how to balance the system is another challenge that the operator would have. But absolutely, they'll monitor it. We have service levels that we've negotiated, so we'll be looking at examples where, some stations are continually running out of bikes. Those are adjustments that would be made. And conversely, if some stations have an abundance of bikes that aren't being used, then certainly we can use that space for other things.
And I think I've got time for one more quick question, which is, you've been at this a long time. We've revisited this a number of times. So obviously you've looked and seen all the headlines and probably know all the cities where it's having trouble, Seattle, Montreal, wherever financially. Mm-hmm. Have any of them given you any learnings from their experiences that's to say, okay, we made a mistake here, don't do that, guys, or help you out in some way?
Yeah, it's been a constant learning process. Some of that was, just the industry evolving, and so you'll see that Cycle Hop has a little different business plan, has a little different pricing structure. So the industry as a whole has learned. We've learned from municipalities. The partnership is going to be absolutely key, that we work effectively together. There's things that we can assist with, around locations. There's areas that they have expertise on around the business piece and the operational piece. So yeah, we've learned that a really productive working relationship between the two of us is key. And I mentioned earlier the temptation to expand beyond what makes cost-effective sense, and so how to balance that with the desire to get bike share out to all neighborhoods. You'll see that in car share. If I use car share as an example, you've seen some of the car share companies have expanded a little too far, and then now they're contracting a little bit. Because if you don't have the density, if you don't have the trip generation, if you don't have the activity happening there, then it's hard to justify a piece of infrastructure that might only get used once every couple of days. And so it's finding that balance. So part of it is done through science and experience and done in advance, and part of it is just monitoring and adapting as we go to make sure the system stays successful.
And we'll receive your report, a written copy of your report? It will be put out for the public 2 days?
Yeah, I think right now
Great, thank you. I didn't know that. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, we've negotiated with them. We'll have an annual report that provides all the statistics and updates on the performance of the system.
Great, thank you.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Ball. And that is all the questions. And big thanks again to the whole team, to you, Jerry, and the team for the work to make this happen. We're looking forward to seeing it roll out, and I'm hoping we can get some demo of what we're about to get into here in the days or weeks ahead. Get an opportunity for Vancouverites to see what system is coming this summer, and be able to build some excitement around that. Is that something we're expecting in the near term? Or?
Yes, is it bike tomorrow? Yeah, there'll be a media event tomorrow, and we have a bike in town. So, yeah, we've turned the page now, and it's hurry up. So,
Okay.
yeah, it'll be starting tomorrow.
Good stuff. Great work. Thanks very much for all that and the update on completing a big goal for this council and in the last several councils. So we'll look forward to that soon. That is all for our report reference on the public bicycle system. We're going to move on in our agenda. And before we do that, I want to acknowledge we have from our park board, Commissioner Catherine Evans here. Thanks for joining us here at council. We are going to hear the report that was held for separate debate, separate vote, conflict of interest. Councillor Carr, you had asked for policy report 1 to be held.
Yes.
You have the floor.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I have several questions that prior to the vote on referral that I'm particularly interested in hearing some responses to. My first question is around the fact that that there are definitions of what will constitute an urban farm, and fruits and vegetables are specifically listed in all of the background information. So I was a little worried about whether that encompasses everything that we want. So I kind of looked at some research around how do you define fruits and vegetables. Would it include grains, for example, which we have promoted in the city, front yard grain growing and herbs. And I'm just wondering if you could make sure that it's clear in this report if what fruits and vegetables mean, and if they include particularly herbs and grains, which I think are, and maybe nuts, there might be nuts in the trees. There might be some things that are not captured. I want to make sure we've thought that through so that it can be clear at public hearing. You're just taking notes? Okay, I'll just keep on then. Great, thanks. Secondly, I noticed that we've got land that the urban farms are going to land on, and they include industrial and commercial land. And I didn't see if we are requiring soil testing. So if maybe we could have that explained further.
Hi, James O'Neill from Social Policy and Projects. So we are encouraging urban farmers. We've worked with VCH, Vancouver Coastal Health, and ourselves, and we'll be encouraging all urban farms to conduct soil tests. And on the application, we will indicate, have you done a soil test? And they would have to indicate yes or no. And so we're encouraging the urban farms to do so.
Encouraging but not requiring. Maybe we could just make that clear at whatever our protocol is going to be. Make that clear at public hearing. The third question has to do with that we will be using existing staff to process these applications, and I didn't see if there was any indication about whether we're providing more training or expect to be providing more training to staff so that they can become more conversant with the issues surrounding authorizing urban farm.
Yeah, we'll be doing, myself and planning, members of the planning team will be having meetings with development services and licensing staff to ensure that they're brought up to speed on how to process the applications and what is entailed and needed as part of that. So we'll clarify that as well.
Yeah, if you could, I expect that there may be public interest in that at the time of public hearing, so I think being prepared with those answers would be a good idea. I was also curious why the guidelines, that this is Appendix C, I think, allow Class B farms in heritage zones. I mean, does that mean that we can have farms in Shaughnessy and Gastown and Chinatown?
No. The Chinatown, Gastown, Yaletown, those three places.
But not the heritage area in Shaughnessy? But we can have it in those three zones. Maybe an explanation of that would be, it'd be interesting at the time of public hearing. I think it's a curious, if I was curious about it, I think other people might be curious about that. Just a second. And I'm assuming, although we were quite clear about the fact that we're not encouraging on the non-ALR land of the residential zones, commercial and industrial zones, the movement through to applying for farm status. But although it's not stated specifically, I gather in Southlands where we have agricultural land reserve lands that, and we already have farms, farm status, that there could be an expansion of those farms in that area. Is that true or not? Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
I mean, the policy as recommended doesn't really have any impact or touch upon the ALR land in Southlands.
Right. Maybe we could be clear about
Okay.
that at the time of public hearing. And those are my questions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to move. Oh, there's another speaker. Okay.
Thanks, Councillor Carr. Councillor Deal is next.
Yes, thanks very much. Thanks, Mr. O'Neill. Now, you've been working on this for quite a while, you and Ms. Zach and others. When you come back to public hearing, when we come back, if we could just bring a little bit of an explanation of why it took so long. There was public support, but I know there were some technical issues that you ran into, and I think that would be of interest to the public as to why it took so long to get here, even though we were clearly in support and there was a demand from it from local businesses. So just a little bit of that history of what the complicating factors were that led to this.
Perfect, will do.
Okay, thanks, and I'd be happy to move referral.
Okay, referral is moved. Any debate on that? All those in favor of referral, recommendations including referral? Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you very much to the team. We'll see that at public hearing. And we have completed the item that was held from our the consent agenda and the reports. So we need a motion to rise for a committee of the whole. Moved by Councillor Deal. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. A motion to adopt the report of the committee. Councillor Deal moves. Councillor Jang seconds. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. On to bylaws. There are 15 on bylaws on the updated agenda for consideration by council, and bylaw 15, as I said earlier, is being moved to the council meeting tomorrow. That follows our standing committee meeting. And I'll ask if any members wish to hold any of the other bylaws for debate, separate vote, or because of conflict of interest. Seeing none, I will ask for someone to move adoption of bylaws 1 to 14. Councillor Louie, and seconder, Councillor Deal. Any debate on the 14 bylaws in the package? All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Carries unanimously, and the list of approved bylaws can be viewed on the city's website. We have 2 administrative motions which are to be moved. Actually, they need a mover. The administrative motions, Councillor Louie, Councillor Deal will second. Any debate on those administrative motions? All those in favor? Any opposed? And those carry. So we're on to motions on notice. And motion on notice B5 has had previously been withdrawn from the agenda. And motions on notice B1, B4, and B6, and B3 were all referred to tomorrow's standing committee meeting on policy and strategic priorities to hear from speakers. So we'll deal with those tomorrow. That means we have 1 remaining motion for consideration, and that is on leaves of absence for Councillors Louie, Jang, Deal, and myself. I'll ask someone to move that motion. Councillor Carr, Councillor Ball will second. Any debate on that leaves of absent motion? All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. And as I said, the rest of those are going to tomorrow to hear from speakers. So we are already on to a notice of motion, new business inquiries, and other matters. And Councillor DeGenova, you're first on the queue.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have attended a number of events, wonderful events over the past few weeks, so I just wanted to share that with council. A number of other councillors also were there. The first event, I understand it was kicked off by Councillor Deal and Councillor Affleck and Councillor Carr here at City Hall, was the celebration of the 51st birthday of the Canadian flag. And Patrick Reed, I understand, collaborated and came together to make sure that the Canadian flag as we see it today, and we're very proud and honored to see it. It was honored here, and I also attended lunch and read the proclamation at the lunch. So I just wanted to bring that to council council's attention. Also, tomorrow, not today, but tomorrow is Pink Shirt Day. And I think that it's very important to recognize this as there's a campaign throughout the province, and I know throughout Canada actually, to bring awareness to bullying, not only in schools, but everywhere we go. So I see that Councillor Ball and I think Councillor Deal has some pink, and Councillor Carr is in a shade of pink today, but maybe tomorrow we could all try and wear some pink just to make sure that we recognize Pink Shirt Day. Also, I had the pleasure and honor of attending Megaphone's Big Sell event, and I know Councillor Meggs and Councillor Carr also attended that. That was a fantastic event, and I'm sure my fellow councillors know that Megaphone supports low-income and homeless vendors, and we each got the opportunity to pair up with a vendor that day and sell. And I think we had some friendly competition. My other councillors weren't too far behind me, but I think we sold $97, my partner and I. So that was that was exciting. And just please remember to purchase a megaphone when you're out on the streets. It certainly does support a great cause. And then I also had the honor of attending the opening of the Vancouver Art Gallery's mashup. Councillor Deal gave a lovely presentation there on behalf of the city, and I really urge all of you to go out and take a look at Mashup, which is a fantastic exhibit that explores the birth of modern culture. So just wanted to bring up those events that I had attended this week. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and in previous weeks.
Thanks, Councillor DeGenova. Councillor Ball.
Yes, thank you. Forgive me for not standing today.
No
I would like to bring forward something that is very important to the Seniors Committee at the City of Vancouver. And Councillor Meggs several, I believe, months ago brought to Council's attention some issues with the new bus route proposals in South Vancouver. And indeed, the Seniors Committee would like Council to be aware that they will be sending you a formal letter, but they asked me to express their real concern over the fact that almost 25% of Vancouver seniors will be in some issue or another over the proposed new bus route. So they are hoping that we will speak on their behalf, and as there will be an issue with getting you to a letter formally because of our regulations. They did want me to bring up the concerns and their worries that the proposed routes will lead to isolation because some seniors can only go so far, and the distance will be quite far in terms of the proposed routes. So with all best wishes from them, they would like you to note their concern and thank Councillor Meggs for bringing it forward some months ago, but hopefully that we'll be able to assist them in this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ball, for bringing that forward. And next up is Councillor Stevenson.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. A couple of items I wanted to raise. The first I actually wanted to raise on a point of privilege right at the beginning of the council meeting, but the clerk informed me that it wasn't possible to do it then. I had to do it at this time in the council meeting under other matters, and that is in regard to a remark that I made last council regarding a possible conflict of interest with Councillor DeGenova. I actually was concerned when I heard there was concern about this and went back and had a look at the tapes to see precisely what I said, because I thought I was quite clear and not so definitive. But unfortunately, you can't hear a thing in those tapes. The mics went off and on, and you can't hear anything, so I can't get a hold of those remarks myself. But nevertheless, that really doesn't matter. The point of what I'm wanting to say now is that I do, of course, know that Councillor DeGenova is well aware of the conflict of interest regulations, and that it's up to a councillor to make any remarks themselves about that. It's not up to another councillor. And in that regard, I really do regret that I even mentioned at that time. So I'd like to apologize for that and realize it's a very good learning for me in that regard. Sometimes my rhetoric gets a little flamboyant, I realize, when I'm making a point, and I think that was the case. The second thing I wanted to raise was in regards to this last weekend, Positive Living, the Persons with AIDS Society, the old Persons with AIDS Society, had a really large fundraising event that was hugely successful, and it's one of the key fundraising events in the year for Positive Living. It's really an important one. The work that they do, as we all know, is really quite incredible. And it was at the Commodore, and it was sold out, and it was really a fun of evening. It's called, the title of it is RED, Positive Living RED event. And I know many of you also had supported that in one way or the other. I went only with my red socks and my suit, and that was my contribution. That was my contribution to the event. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. And Councillor Louis next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a bit of a shopping list myself, and the things that I've been undertaking on behalf of yourself, your worship, and of council. Just to note that we had a very significant parade in our city this past weekend, and we had a great turnout from most of council. I know that Councillor Stevenson was dressed in his full regalia, and Councillor Jang was an award-winning attendee with his garb. So thank you for those of council that took the time to. Yes, the mayor was also an award winner as well. So yes, well, I was thanking those that showed up because it was a rainy day, and but many brave souls did come out, and it was a good time. Certainly, there was a Lunar Fest event in our downtown core that many came to celebrate. And of course, it's not just about the Chinese traditions, because that's my first reference with Chinatown, but Koreans and Vietnamese as well celebrate Lunar New Year's. Many dinners, the Zhuhai dinner, the Northeast China, Donggun, Choose Association, Anwei. These are all different associations that I've had the opportunity to attend and represent each of you in those situations. I do want to make a couple of other notes, though, beyond the events that we may have or may not have attended. I had the opportunity to be in Ottawa, and with Councillor Reimer, as I was in my capacity as president of the FCM, but Councillor Reimer accepted on behalf of the city, and she couldn't be here today, but she accepted on behalf of the city an award from the FCM Sustainable Communities Award for our infrastructure and transportation. And this was more specifically for our initiative on the Point Grey Road Bikeway and the improvements that we had undertaken at that time. So for those of you that, sometimes we're, I think, a little immersed in the local politics and some of the pluses and minuses of what happens here, we are being recognized nationally and, in fact, internationally with awards with initiatives such as what we did in that situation. Lastly, I do want to make note that I had the opportunity to present to the Federal Finance Committee on behalf of local governments for all of Canada. The reception was very strong and from all parties, I would note. Well, the Green Party wasn't represented at the Finance Committee, but certainly the Liberals and the NDP and the Conservatives all were quite appreciative of the efforts of local government and our contributions to helping build a better country. And so I just want to bring that note back to you. We're looking forward to a federal budget on March 22nd. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Louis. And Councillor DeGenova is next. Actually, you were already on.
I just wanted to stand on a point of privilege, Mr. Mayor. If I may, I just wanted to acknowledge Councillor Stevenson's statement earlier, and thank you for the clarification, Councillor Stevenson. I do accept your apology, and I appreciate the clarification that I was not in a conflict of interest on that matter. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both for sorting that all out. And Councillor Carr is next.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. There were wonderful events over the last number of weeks. There's been a few. And I do just want to acknowledge the number of volunteers in our city that make such events happen, and really thank those volunteers. I mean, you can't have a huge parade as we did. An amazing turnout given the pouring rain. But those kinds of events take a lot of effort and planning, and I just thank the organizations and the incredible number of volunteers who make those events happen. And I just wanted to also mention an event last night, largely put together by volunteers, which was the Hub Cycling Connection Award Night. And it's so apropos given the bike share presentation that we had earlier from Mr. Dobrovony, because these particular awards were acknowledging bike-friendly businesses and what businesses do in this city to encourage amongst their employees various training and building the capacity and the interest in cycling. Van City was the award or it was to Van City the award that I gave out last night for their efforts to work within their staff and provide 8 workshops, which did everything from just encouraging people to be aware of what routes they can take in the city to things as practical as how to change a tire. I think maybe that information getting out more broadly to the businesses, particularly this bike share program we're embarking on, is really going to be an opportunity for people to, take that last link between the bus or the transit and their workplace, that more businesses get involved in such endeavors. And I hope that we reach out to them and encourage them, and Hub is certainly doing that and giving them awards for doing it. So I think there's a nice synergy there. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Carr. And that is all we have on the queue with new business and other matters. So we need a motion to adjourn this council meeting. Councillor Louis, seconded by Councillor Jang. Any debate? All those in favor? Any opposed? And that carries. This council meeting is adjourned, and we will meet in camera at 11 o'clock. 7 minutes.